Insufficient resources. So what would be missing? Why would you have insufficient resources? What must be missing?
Understanding of what's needed.
Pardon me?
Understanding.
I know what I need, so understanding is needed, but what would be missing that I have insufficient resources? Why would I ever have insufficient resources? Initiative might be, but if you look at it, the only reason I would not have enough resources is either A, I've not asked for them, and B, if I have asked for them, they've been declined, which is okay. So the primary, it's like in the very beginning of the book with Abraham, insufficient resources because the request has not been made. My daughter went through this and we had her craft, but here's the thing about making the request for resources. It's a performance conversation, and it's a performance conversation in which you both make the request and make a promise. My daughter worked for an organization and she wanted another staff person. And she talked to her boss about getting another staff person, and he said no. And I told her, I said, Danielle, that's her name. I said, you know, look, everybody in the organization wants more staff. What are you going to do with it? You're going to get more staff and what, just so you can do your job? He's not going to pay for more staff just for you to get what you're already getting done. Well, it'll be easier on me. He doesn't care that it's easier on you. I don't mean to be mean, but he doesn't. What he cares about is this is an investment of resources. What am I going to get as a return? What will you do for the organization if you get this additional resource? I said, really, what difference will it make? So she worked out the difference it would make. So she made the request, and here's the promise. It was a performance conversation. I request this resource. Here's the promise I make. And the condition was, if I don't keep the promise, you take the resource back. It's just a straight out conversation. Now, he can decline it, in which case, to continue talking about insufficient resources would be what? A complaint. And you've already made the complaint, you've already made the request to the person who could do something about it, and you've got declined, which is a valid response. I wonder why you would be complaining about something that's a valid turn down. Mischief, but we won't get into that mischief. Poor planning. So poor planning, where do you think poor planning comes out? Which kind of conversations are mostly missing in a poor planning? No, understanding. That's where all that stuff gets worked out. Poor planning is a product of really not having well-developed, sufficient understanding conversations. Now, it can also come from the fact that once you get into it, priorities have shifted and you haven't now revisited, completed, had closure conversations, but many of them come from we really haven't had the conversations necessary to get the things connected. So, you have a choice. And the choice you have is whether to communicate or not. It's always the choice. And it's always available to you. You either will or you won't communicate. The question is, for what will you communicate? Will you communicate for launching something? Will you communicate for understanding, developing the plans, the wherewithal? Will you communicate for performance? Will you communicate for closure? Are you doing it with the intention of building affinity? Affinity is the primary thing. Integrity, the honoring of agreements is the primary thing, or do you want both? They provide a context for, a foundation for what you want to deal with in your communication. But consider that the choice in whether you communicate and in the form of the conversation you have, that really does decide everything. And it's the only tool, it's one of the only two tools you have available, is communication. Last questions for you? Okay. Thank you. This session is complete. You're terrific. I apologize we couldn't serve champagne and caviar at the break. If you have any questions, contact me and I promise to respond. That's a closure conversation. Thank you.